Hi. Who's your friend?
Who's my little friend? You're talking to me? Or to the
Yeah.
pumpkin? This is Pumpkin who just ate something very sour.
Ah,
That's my friend.
hamburger, most likely.
Well, hamburgers are rarely sour. This is maybe he had like what are those called? The really sour candies. Something Patch Kids. Sour Patch, yeah.
Kimchi.
Kimchi. Kimchi's not sour.
Yeah. It's kind of like sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut isn't sour. Anyway.
Revelations.
Don't make me laugh. It'll be too Blair Witch. So I was just wondering, are you currently a vegan or a vegetarian?
I guess you would say I'm something in between. I wouldn't eat dairy or milk out. Frankly, I don't really buy it either. So what are the exceptions? Basically, it's been like a transitioning process that has involved like sometimes eating things in which dairy or eggs might be a product, but it's very clearly the extension of this. I mean, it's the exact same argument. Everything that I write about in the book applies equally and sometimes even better to eggs and dairy. And so often people will say to me, hey, this is all captivating stuff. If I were to cut out one thing, what's the one thing? And I will usually say eggs. Because certainly from the position of animal welfare, there's nothing much worse than being an egg-laying hen in America.
Okay. What about fish? Do you cover fish?
Fish, I do cover fish. Fish is, it's also difficult. I mean, it's hard to generalize about these things. For people who are into animal rights, it's very easy to generalize. You say it's wrong, don't do it, period. Nothing could possibly make it right. It's not really my perspective, or I don't think it's my perspective. I've sort of bounced around on the map a little bit in the course of writing this and thinking about it, and in part because I really was moved by some of the good farms that I went to. I went to farms where the animals are treated, I would say, better than I treat my dog. They're fed better foods than I feed my dog. So there's obviously an important difference, which is that I don't kill my dog and eat my dog. But I find it hard to argue against what they're actually doing on these farms, except that it's such it occupies such an incredibly small space in agriculture. Far less than 1% of animals raised in this country come from such farms, that to talk about meat, it's pretty safe just to generalize. I mean, it's correct, it's accurate to say that meat is really factory farming in America. In any case, fish. I talk about fish. There are a lot of different ways that fish are caught, and of course there are many different species of seafood. And I don't love making generalizations about, is it wrong to eat all seafood? A shrimp is not a tuna, and a wild salmon is not a farmed salmon. Maybe the simplest way to talk about it is just to say my own choices, which are that I don't eat, any kind.
Okay. And so while you've been in San Francisco, where have you eaten, and what have you eaten?
I've eaten precious little, is the truth. I've had so little time. I had oatmeal this morning, and that is so far all I've eaten today. I was very lucky to get an invitation from Alice Waters to go to have a meal, I don't think prepared by her, but maybe at her restaurant. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And it highlights something interesting, which is like an alliance in an unlikely place, perhaps. She eats meat and serves meat, and yet is inviting me, author of Eating Animals, to come eat at her place. And I think that's great. The industry encourages a kind of divisiveness among the public. You are somebody who is a crazy vegetarian, or you are a normal person who eats meat. You are a farmer, or you're not. When in fact, the most mainstream values, the values that someone like an Alice Waters has, the values that I have, the values that, in fact, 96% of Americans have. 96% of Americans think animals deserve legal protection, are more important than the differences. So it's easy to leap to the sort of philosophical or hypothetical differences. Clearly, Alice Waters thinks it's okay to eat meat. I wouldn't do it myself, but that difference isn't nearly as important as all of the things that we share, namely, animals shouldn't be mistreated on farms. Farms shouldn't, callously destroy the environment. Animals shouldn't be fed antibiotics from life until death. It matters how farmers are treated, what they're paid for their products. It matters what we ask them to grow. And those are very, very powerful points of agreement. And I think this whole conversation is in the process of being reframed from something that's absolutist, like you're this or you're not this, to finding the great overlaps in our values and how those values are being, we are asked to ignore our values by the system that's in place that produces meat. A rambling answer.
Chez Panisse, it's a great restaurant.
Yeah, I've never been there, but
They cater well to vegetarians.
and I'm sure she has really great things to say about. I mean, she has said she assumes everybody will be a vegetarian at some point in the future. I'm not even sure I would say that, but she's obviously a very, very thoughtful food person.
Very progressive. I love her. So, having written 2 critically acclaimed fiction books, did you ever foresee yourself writing a book like this, or?
No, I never. I never thought I would write a work of nonfiction, and I don't think I'll ever write another. I mean, there's a funny writing, as Pumpkin knows. Writing requires you to think and care about something for several years at a time, and so you necessarily gravitate towards the things that you find most compelling. So, with my second novel, for example, I wrote a proposal for the publishing house and described this book that I was quite sure I was going to write. And what I wrote couldn't possibly have been more different. I mean, there was not a strand of overlap. And that was the case because I ended up pursuing things that I was interested in, that I had, liked to think about or had strong feelings about. So one of the things that compelled me to write this book is that the topic of meat is something I've been thinking about and having strong feelings about since I was a kid. And the deeper I got into the research, the stronger were my feelings, the more thoughts I had. What was I also going to say? I can't remember what I was going to say.
You pretty much answered.
Maybe that's it. Maybe just that. One thing that's just pleasant about this topic is the more you think about it, the more interesting it gets, and the more there is there. I love now doing readings because I get to interact with audiences, and many of my opinions about the most fundamental, seemingly fundamental questions, I guess the philosophical question. I find that when it comes to the practical issues, my opinions are very strong. When it comes to the theoretical, philosophical questions, my opinions are very flimsy. Most people think that the important question is it right or wrong to kill animals for food? And that's a question I don't really have an answer for. I mean, I guess my instincts lead me toward thinking it's wrong, but it's not the important question. And it's actually a diverting question. It conceals the more important questions. The meat industry is very happy to have people obsess over that question and to have animal rights people and farmers or PETA activists and someone like an Alice Waters as if they were on opposite ends of the spectrum. But they're not. They're on the same end of the spectrum. And at the opposite end is factory farming. So I really spent my time and energy addressing those practical questions, but now it is pleasant to also think about the philosophical, hypothetical ones, even if they won't influence our decisions. I know many, 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 many people who think it's perfectly right to eat animals, but don't, because the ways that we're doing it are wrong. A lot of seeing things for oneself makes some of the mental work moot.
And my last question is, since you're you're a young superstar writer, who's
Did you hear that?
did you hear that, Pumpkin? So who's a new young writer that you're excited about?
Well, my son is just beginning to write. I mean, he's only 3, but I'm very excited about that. I hope he doesn't become a professional writer. That would be a serious drag for about 100 different reasons. But, to be honest, in the last 3 years, almost all of my reading had to do with this. And for every 4 pages of text, there's a page of footnotes. There's 70 pages of footnotes. And I'm very excited about returning to fiction, both because I'm dying to write it again, but also I'm dying to read it again. So I'm curious to see how this will. I'm going to be a little bit like a priest who exits the priesthood and has sex for the first time. Like, I've built up a lot of energy, to read and to write, and I'm very excited to see what will happen.
The literary energy is just going to burst out.
It's going to explode.
Do you have any idea what your next book is going to be about?
I have a couple of different ideas. I had it in mind to try to write a thriller, almost like a sci-fi thriller. I don't know why. Maybe for kitschy reasons, or maybe just because I haven't done it. I want to, at some point, continue Everything is Illuminated, my first book, and follow my grandfather into America. He has I think his story gets more powerful the further it's followed. I say my grandfather as if it were a work of nonfiction. I think my grandfather in that book had one arm, was a sex maniac. Not my real grandfather. But somehow pursuing that story is something I'm also really I want to do at some point.
It's great. We look forward to reading sci-fi thrillers or grandfather stories.
Sci-fi thrillers. Life is short.
I think
Why
it's
not,
perfect because, keep doing unexpected things, and that would continue that.
We'll see.
We get a new fan base, sci-fi geeks.
I don't need a new fan base. I just need to do the right thing. That's as a writer, that's the question. It's funny. Zadie Smith wrote a great essay about humor in The New Yorker, and she talked about the experience of going out with a whole bunch of comedians after a show. And she said, all they ask is, was it funny? Was it funny? Was it funny when I paused before the punchline? Was it funny when I looked at that person in the audience? Was it funny when I did this? Was it funny? And she said there was an obsessiveness to it that's insane. But she was also jealous because at least they knew what the question was. And as a writer, you don't even know what the question is. Is it smart? Is it interesting? Is it new? Is it funny? Is it tragic? You don't know. And so you can never know if something is successful. But there's a certain feeling you have when you get it right. And that's what we all strive for.
Well, thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.